Hi, I'm Scott at ediblemusic.com. Sometimes you're working with a reverb and it sounds fine, but it just needs a little bit of something extra. So I want to give you some inspiration today with a few ways to add some movement, some interest, and some dynamics to your reverb. I've got a good sound example here. These are some shakers, so they'll have some nice movement already, and we want to use the reverb to enhance that. For example, if we were to send it to a reverb here, right? It sounds good. It's just the default reverb, but there are some cool things that you can do with it. And the first thing that I'd like to show you is to use an LFO. And there are a lot of different ways to use an LFO in your practice, but here we're just going to use it to add a little bit of modification to the signal. That's what an LFO is good for. That's what we're going to use it for here. I'm just turning the reverb off to show you what the LFO is doing. So you can hear it's just doing a little bit of adjustment to the way that the rhythm of the shakers sound, so that when we add it into the reverb, I'll bring it in. That one's very subtle, just to ease you into this. The next one is what I think is one of the more underrated effects, which is the flanger. And you will probably have a flanger in your workstation by default, or you might even have several of them. Flangers combine some comb filtering and some time-based effects. It's sort of a combination of those, and the results that you can get by using them on your reverb is really fun. Here's the flanger. If you pull the dry wet down, you hear that kind of coming along with it? Here it is without it. And I'll bring it back in. Notice how it just puts something behind those shakers that seems to sway around a little. Both of these, the LFO and the flanger, you don't need to be a master at using them. If you've never used them before, just load one up and click around and see what happens. I think it's fun to experiment with reverbs like that. The third thing I want to show you is distortion. And if you have any distortion plugin, guitar pedal emulation, anything like that, that will do just fine. I'm going to use a pedal emulation here. And adjust the tone a bit. Here's our original reverb again, and I'll add them in one at a time. Very slight there. Some movement with the flanger, and then a lot of distortion. You can bring the dry wet down on that too. And then you can move them around, see what they sound like in front of the reverb or behind the reverb. You can rearrange them, put the flanger at the end. Or you can put the flanger before, so that it's flanging the signal, and then the flanged signal is going into the reverb and then into the distortion. Or put the pedal up here too. Let's move those shakers out and bring in a different example. Here's a big drum sound. Here it is with the reverb. And then again, I'll add in the effects one at a time. See how they influence it. Put the flanger afterwards. Lots that you can do on your reverb channels. These are just 3 examples to show you how you can add some dynamic movement, some rhythmic movement, some spatial movement, and of course some coloration with the distortion. These are just a few examples. I super encourage you to try out whatever you've got in your cupboard of your mixing effects. Try putting them onto your reverb channel and see how it sounds and play around with it a little bit. Try it out. Have fun.